Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to look into today is the still unsolved abduction of Chandra Levy. At one point it was thought that this case was solved, and in the eyes of the law it was for a time, but then it got overturned, and it's just, this case is just very, very strange how it all happened, and so let's just get into it. This case was suggested by Ruth, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and if you have any more, please do let me know. Chandra Ann Levy was born on the 14th of April in 1977. To her parents, Robert and Susan, she was born in Cleveland, in Ohio. They eventually moved to Modesto, which is actually in California, and that is where she would be raised. She ended up going to Grace M High School, and she was brought up Jewish. Chandra was quite a shy and quiet girl. However, she had these big ambitions. She knew exactly what she wanted to do, and that was to go into law enforcement. That was what she dreamed of. That was where she wanted her career to go, and that is what she worked towards to get that. She ended up going to university, getting eventually a master's degree in public administration from the University of Southern California. Just before, she ended up with this internship in Washington, which she did move to and go ahead and do. But just before that, she even sort of volunteered at a local police station. And then she moved to Washington, where she began a paid internship in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. That was in the October of the year 2000. She did really well in it. She did really well in the media, and especially her inquiries into the execution of Timothy McVeigh, who was, I believe, due to be executed around the time that she was there, kind of thing. She did really well in this internship, and it seemed to suit her fantastically. She, in fact, didn't actually do it for that long. I believe about 9 months, because she met her terms for the master's degree very quickly. And so in April of 2001, there was no need for her to carry on with this internship, and so she would go back to sort of graduate by the end of May in 2001. So that's exactly what she did. She prepared to move back home into California, where she would just finish her master's and obviously graduate from university. She had a gym membership where she was in Washington, which she cancelled. She rang the landlord where she was staying, say that basically she was going to give up a lease because she was moving back to California, and she began packing. 5 days passed by, and Chandra's parents haven't heard anything from her. It was now the 6th of May in 2001, and they're getting worried, rightly so. So they have tried to call her on numerous occasions, and they've not got any response. They've not been able to get hold of her at all, and so they start to panic. So they ring the police, and they report their daughter as missing. The police go to her apartment, and when they enter, they see that she's packed up. She's packed up most of her stuff. There was a few strange things that were there though, like her phone was still there. All her IDs and things were all still sat there in the apartment. So if she would have left to go somewhere or something like that, you would have thought that she would have brought a phone or ID. They're just things that you normally grab, and especially if she's not been seen for 5 days. So, you know, if she's just left and gone on a trip for 5 days and decided that she just needed a break, those would be the things you take, and they were still in her apartment. Everything was still in her apartment. There was only a couple of things missing, and that was her keys and this gold ring that she had got. Her parents had got it as a graduation present, and it had her initials in diamonds, CL, on the ring. So Chandra didn't actually live too far away from Rock Creek Park, and they canvassed the area around her house. And obviously, because that park was pretty close, they obviously searched around there too. I believe they searched 100 yards from the road inwards, and they unfortunately couldn't find anything. They called local hospitals to see whether she had been injured, and they didn't know who she was because obviously all her IDs were at home, but there was nothing in that retrospect either. That was when Susan began looking through her daughter's phone records, and she comes across this number that has been called many times. So she decides to give this number a call. Obviously it was someone that Chandra knew and called a lot, and so, you know, maybe they knew where she was. So she rings this number, and the person that actually answered the phone was a congressman. He was called Gary Condit. He was a married father of 2, and there was a lot of controversy surrounding this case with regards to them two and whether they were having a relationship or not. So he basically said that he denies having, well, he's not really said anything on having a sexual relationship with Chandra, and I mean, years later he still will not say anything on the matter, but he has admitted that he used to, you know, hang out with her things. I believe he said that she'd been to his condo on 2 occasions, but again, he doesn't get into whether they were having sexual relations or not. And there is a lot of speculation around it all, and there was around the time of the case as well. I believe initially he did deny having any sort of relationship with her at all, but then would later admit to bits of it. They did a search of his apartment on the 10th of July, but I believe that didn't uncover anything. There were a few things in the Chandra Levy case that actually hindered it a lot. So this untrained police officer goes into her apartment, goes onto her computer, and then her search history ends up corrupt. And so, you know, it's literally not usable. They couldn't recover anything from it after that. I found that a bit strange. Like, why would you let a police officer that didn't have a clue what they were doing into look at evidence that could have potentially been vital? Like, what she was searching up that day may have been the key to solving her case, and it was just gone. Not only that, they had CCTV around her apartment, and the thing with CCTV, as probably most of you know, you need to sort of get it straight away, because it gets overwritten. A lot of them get overwritten very quickly, and if you don't request it or tell them to put it to the side or whatever and keep it, then it will be overwritten and therefore will be lost forever. And that's what they did too. They didn't request the CCTV initially, and if they did at some point, which I don't know whether they did eventually, it was already gone. It was already too late by that point. Again, losing another vital piece of information that could have cracked this case, but they just didn't have it. The media was massively involved in Chandra's case, and especially because it was controversial around a literal congressman and an affair. And the thing that makes me really sad about that is that they didn't really focus on the fact that Chandra was missing. They were focusing on a congressman having he had an affair with this woman and he had a wife and kids, and it is so controversial. They didn't really focus on her, which is, in my opinion, what they should have been focusing on, because she was missing, and yet they're just going on about the affair, well, potential affair that they had. And so it was left to Chandra's family to try and put the focus back on her and the fact that she was missing, and they were trying to find their daughter. They put up missing persons posters, they was on the news and doing appeals and just anything they could to keep their daughter's case in the public eye and to try and move it away from the whole affair thing. Now, I do believe that Gary wasn't ever really a suspect. Of course, they looked into him, and they looked into him a lot, but I have seen an interview with a police officer who said that when they actually interviewed Gary, he was not a suspect, and by the time they had finished interviewing Gary, he was still not a suspect. So, you know, they did interview him, they looked into him, but they never really thought he was involved in her going missing. In the interview, he said that they did have a close relationship together and that he really, really liked her, but that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. And then the case seemed to just go cold because they searched everywhere for Chandra. They had no evidence of anything really to tie anyone to her. They didn't have her body, and it just went cold. Obviously, there were still little bits of leads coming in, and her family was still trying to put her face out there and keep her in the public eye. But, you know, as time passes and no information comes in, the case does unfortunately run cold, and that is what Chandra's case did. That was until around a year later, in the May of 2002. It was on the 22nd. It was about 9:30 a.m. in the morning when somebody walking their dog rang 911. They had found a human skull in Rock Creek Park. The remains were very decomposed. You know, they had been out in the open and for a long time now, and so they were skeletal, and they had to ID this person through dental records, and it came back that it was Chandra Levy. A search of the area uncovered a few different things. They uncovered her Reebok trainers. They also found her leggings, which were for some reason tied up in knots. They found a sports bra along with like a sweatshirt, gym shirt, I don't know what it's called. They also found her Walkman. And this area was just 5 miles away from her home. As I said, the park was quite close to where she lived anyway, and they did search it, but it was huge. They only searched 100 yards off all of the roads, and unfortunately she was a bit further out. If they would have done it from the footpath rather than the road, the main road, then they may have actually found her. But obviously, you know, hindsight and everything, you can't just say that. They put a limit on it, and that is how far they searched, and that is what they did, and unfortunately it just wasn't enough. It did really hinder the case too though, because any DNA that they may have found in the early stages, if they found her body sooner, by this point was like gone. There was just nothing left, unfortunately. So that just was another hindrance in Chandra's case. On the 28th of May, the ME declared that her death was a homicide, but they couldn't find her actual cause of death because of how much she had decomposed. Like I said, she was skeletal, and they just couldn't find her actual cause of death, unfortunately. For certain, anyway, they did find some damage to her hyoid bone, which could suggest that she was strangled. But again, there just wasn't enough evidence of that to actually rule that as her certain cause of death. And therefore, it remains unidentified. Now, in that park, around not too far from where Chandra's body was found, 2 women had also been attacked at knife point, and they were attacked at knife point by a man called Ingmar Gwenike. He was 20 years old, and he had been charged and served 10 years for the assault of these women. And so, of course, they began to think that possibly he may have been involved in that. And then that was kind of reaffirmed when they had somebody come forward. Now, obviously, they looked into him, but he just denied having anything to do with her murder, and they had no evidence to tie him to it whatsoever, and so that was that. And also, by that point, they didn't think Gary had anything to do with it, as I've already said. So it was just, again, it was just going cold. They had now found a body, but they still didn't seem to be any further along in the case, finding out who had done this to her. They looked further into Ingmar, and they found that on the day that Chandra was actually murdered, he never turned up at work. And then in the days preceding that, he had these marks on his face, which obviously could insinuate that he had been involved in a fight or something like that. But again, they didn't have anything to tie him to it, and basically that was that. Now we're going to skip forward to the 3rd of March in 2009. So this is 7 years later, and a warrant for Ingmar's arrest was issued. He was arrested, and they had a trial, and he was actually found guilty of her murder. Basically, a guy came forward who used to be a member of a gang, and he claimed that being in the same prison as Ingmar admitted to him that he had actually murdered Chandra, and he said that it was a robbery gone wrong. He didn't actually mean to kill her, but that where she was located in the park was his normal robbing spot, I guess. And he tried to rob her and then ended up murdering her. And so basically because of that, he was found guilty and he was sent to prison for the murder of Chandra Levy. He got 60 years, I believe. But then it all fell apart. 2 years later, after Ingmar continued to appeal, you know, he said that he was innocent, that he didn't do it. He attacked those women, yes, but he had nothing to do with Chandra. And he kept appealing, and then they were initially rejected, but eventually he was granted another trial. On the 26th of July in 2016, all charges were dropped against Ingmar from the prosecution, and they said that they were not going to pursue him any longer. They would not continue the case against him for Chandra Levy's murder. The witness that they had a history of working with the police and being a police informant, which the jury at the time did not know. They were not made aware of that, and as a result of that, amongst a couple of other things, that is why the charges against him ended up being dropped. This witness was found to be very unreliable, and basically the police thought that they couldn't prove beyond reasonable doubt that Ingmar was the one that killed Chandra anymore, because they had no evidence to tie him into it. All the evidence was gone, if there was any in the first place, And, you know, all he had was this witness who was now proving to be unreliable. And so they can't base a murder charge off of that. And so, you know, it was dropped. So as of yet, Chandra's case still remains a mystery. You know, it was seemingly solved at one point, but now it remains unsolved. There are, of course, a lot of theories in the case, which I'm going to touch on now. So apparently Chandra was frightened of this park. Now, she didn't like going in on her own, and this is just speculation. I do not know that. It's just what I've read. So there's a lot of speculation as to her why she was in that park in the first place. Some people think that she went for a run, and when I first read, you know, where her body was found and the clothing that was found around her body, I personally believed that she had gone for a run or a walk, because she had a Walkman, she had like jogging gear on, as if she'd gone for a run or a walk. So some people believe that she went for that and that she was attacked whilst there. But others don't believe that, because they say that she was scared of this park. I don't know, maybe she was scared of going there in the dark and she went in daylight, and because she had cancelled her gym membership because she was going to California, she just wanted to go out for a run. And there you go. She ended up in that park and somebody killed her. Some people think that, of course, Gary did it. And some people think that, of course, Gary didn't do it. Now, obviously, a motive for Gary. People believe that because she was moving back to California, why would he attack her? You know, their affair was going to end. They were going to go their separate ways, and that was that. But on the other hand, you could think that maybe he didn't want to lose her. Some people have killed for a lot less than that. So, there you go. But the police don't believe that Gary is a suspect. So, I guess that one's up to you as to what you believe. Other people have also obviously believed that Ingmar was the one who did kill her. And obviously it could have been true. It could have been true that he was robbing her that day, and then he ended up killing her because she fought back or whatever. And he killed her either by accident or on purpose. Again, there's just nothing in this case to prove anything, because the internet history was gone, the CCTV was never taken, and then her body wasn't found until like a year later, and all the DNA was gone. And so there's just nothing. Absolutely nothing. Also, Chandra did have pepper spray, which she would take out with her, and so people have questioned as to why she didn't have that on her if she went out for a run. Now, maybe she just forgot it that day. Maybe she didn't feel like she needed it because it was daytime. There could be numerous reasons as to why she didn't take the pepper spray that day. Either way, there are so many questions in this case, and whether it will ever get solved, who knows? To this day, all these years later, Gary has still never really admitted to having sexual relations with her. I believe he went on the TV show not too long ago, and even then he basically said that he's not mentioned anything all of these years, and so why would he start now? But he still proclaims his innocence, and so does everybody else involved in this case. I really hope that one day there is a break in this case, even though it seems quite unlikely because there's just nothing, no DNA, no nothing. But that doesn't mean that one day maybe something will turn up. Maybe somebody knows something out there and somebody saw something and they will finally come forward, because Chandra's family just want to know what happened to their daughter. She was missing, you know, for a year before they found out that she had been murdered, and then they could finally lay her body to rest, which, you know, at least they got that closure in a sense, like they knew what had happened to her. Because sometimes you just want to know whether they are alive or whether they are no longer alive. They just want to know, and they did find that out. They were able to bring her body home and lay her to rest, but now they need justice for her. They want to know who did this to their daughter, and they need justice for that, and they should be serving time for that. So I truly, truly hope that one day her murderer is found, and that her family can finally get the justice and peace of mind that they deserve. But yeah, that is the end of the case. If you have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for similar content. Thank you to all my regulars, as always. I appreciate you. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of Chandra Levy. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.